They never asked why I skipped their lavish Thanksgivings, why I rolled up to their Hamptons mansion in a beat-up Honda Civic, or why I smiled through every barbed insult they tossed my way. For 10 years, my family didn't care, didn't see the hurt I buried under those tight-lipped grins, until I built something they couldn't ignore. I'm Valerie Cross, to the world. Cross, the shadow founder of Crosspoint Innovations, a tech empire rewriting the rules of enterprise systems. But to them, I was just the middle child who'd never amount to much. To the Cross family, I was the disappointment who turned her back on Cross and Fields, their revered law firm, for what they sneered at as freelance tech gigs. They never wondered what I was forging in my dingy Brooklyn apartment, why I dodged their holiday gatherings, or why I let their mockery slide off me like rain. They saw a failure, a lost cause too stubborn to chase their courtroom glory. That all changed one crisp morning when Jordan, my assistant of 6 years, burst into my office, breathless. "Ms. Cross, you need to see these applications." He shoved a tablet into my hands. I scrolled and froze. Rachel Cross, my older sister, the family's golden litigator poised to rule Cross and Fields, and Nathan Cross, the smug brother who once told me to build him a better website, had applied for executive roles at my company. My coffee hit the desk, hands shaking, not from shock, but a fury I'd bottled for years. Not because they wanted in now, but because they'd never cared enough to ask why I hurt until I held power they craved. "There's more," Jordan said, flipping to another file. "Your father's firm is pitching legal services to our in-house team. Meetings next week." Of course. Crosspoint was blazing, billion-dollar AI platform, acquisitions dominating headlines. Now, suddenly, I wasn't invisible. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking under a decade of suppressed pain. I could still hear Dad at our last 4th of July barbecue, burger in hand, flag pin gleaming. "Tech startups crash and burn, Valerie. Cross and Fields is 3 generations strong. That's the American dream, not your coding nonsense." Rachel had smirked over her rose, her eyes glinting with pity. "Let her tinker, Dad. She'll come crawling back when it flops." Nathan clapped my shoulder, grinning. "Hey, Val, design me a site when your little dream dies." Every word stabbed, but I smiled, always smiled, because showing the hurt meant giving them more to twist. That was the day I stopped caring what they thought. They'd never see the tears I hid, the nights I questioned myself, the ache I swallowed to keep going. So I built in silence, burying my pain in code and steel. While they toasted their real success, I bootstrapped a company that would eclipse their firm. Every dinner where they pitted me, every smug jab I let slide, fueled a fire they couldn't fathom. I didn't tell them, not out of fear, but to shield the wounds they'd never understand. 6 months after that barbecue, I landed a $500 gig optimizing a startup servers. It bought my first rack, a rickety beast I wired in my closet. I toasted alone with a $2 beer on my fire escape, the Statue of Liberty a faint promise, whispering, "This is for me, not them." Now they wanted seats at my table, a table they swore I'd never build. I stood, staring out as Manhattan glowed golden. My reflection wasn't their lost daughter, it was a woman who'd turned pain into power. "Jordan," I said, voice cold as ice, "schedule the interviews." "You in the room?" he asked. I smirked, old hurts flickering. "Not yet. Let's make them feel the weight first, because tomorrow they'd face a truth I'd hidden. The daughter they dismissed was the empire they now needed, and the pain they ignored was the spark that built it. If you feel her hidden hurt, subscribe. Valerie's story only gets deeper. I didn't disappear from their lives after a blowout or a betrayal. It was a dinner, a Sunday night roast that set my need for their approval ablaze and left nothing but ashes. Picture the scene. Our Westchester dining room, a polished mahogany table stretching long under candlelight, crystal glasses clinking like a toast to their arrogance. I'd just graduated MIT, my computer science degree still warm, references sparkling, and a pitch I'd honed for months, an AI-driven enterprise system to revolutionize scalability. It was bold, bleeding edge, the kind of innovation America was built on. I thought they'd be proud. 3 slides into my presentation, Dad shoved his plate aside, the clatter silencing the room. "You're wasting your potential, Valerie," he said, voice flat as a judge's ruling. "Startups? Tech's a passing fad. Law is legacy, the backbone of this country." The air stilled. Then Rachel's laugh cut through, slow and sharp, a blade dipped in honey. "What, you think you're the next Elon Musk? You couldn't even debug your phone last Thanksgiving." The table erupted in chuckles. Mom glanced away, sipping her Pinot Noir like she could dodge the second-hand embarrassment. Nathan piled on, grinning wide. "Hey, Val, maybe start small, build us a website for the firm. Baby steps, right? Baby steps." I stared at them, their smug faces glowing in the chandelier's light. They weren't just dismissing my vision, they were dismantling it, repackaging it into something small, laughable, disposable. That night, I didn't sleep. Holed up in my childhood bedroom, diplomas framed on the walls, dusty trophies lining the shelves, I made a vow. I'd stop begging for their belief. Their laughter echoed in my skull, a looped taunt I couldn't mute. I walked away from their backup plans and pitying offers, cashed out my savings, dipped into the trust fund they'd earmarked for a condo in their approved zip code, and rented a 500-square-foot Brooklyn dive. No heat, flickering lights, a view of a grimy brick wall. No dramatic farewell, just silence and grind. I took every gig I could snag, server optimizations, cybersecurity audits, back-end builds, anything that paid and sharpened my skills. Days bled into nights spent on Crosspoint, coding on a laptop with a jammed enter key, whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, surviving on ramen and desperation. 3 months in, I scored a $5,000 contract with a logistics firm. Their COO shook my hand in a greasy diner off the turnpike. "Kid, you've got grit, I like that." I used the cash to buy a second-hand desk that wobbled but held, toasting my reflection in a cracked mirror with stale coffee. Every time I faltered, I replayed that dinner. Dad's bored grunt, Rachel's piercing cackle, Nathan's patronizing smirk. It wasn't just a meal, it was a Molotov cocktail lobbed at my dreams, igniting a fire I'd stoke in secret. By year 3, I had a prototype, so tight a Fortune 500 company ran it under NDA. I stood in their server room, watching my code hum to life, saving the millions, and smirked. My hobby was their savior. By year 5, Series C funding rolled in, pushing us past $1 billion valuation. I clinked beers with my tiny team in a dive bar, CNN blaring our name on a fuzzy TV. All while they thought I was consulting. Floundering. Barely afloat. They never looked beyond their Hamptons vacations, their tailored suits, their corner offices with harbor views. Now they were knocking, with resumes and desperation, on the doors of a kingdom they'd once scoffed at. But that dinner left scars, burns I'd carry like badges, reminders of the heat that forged me. If you're gripped by this underdog spark, subscribe now. Valerie's about to flip the script. Building a billion-dollar company isn't a Hollywood montage. It's brutal, lonely nights, busted laptops, and a secret I guarded like a loaded gun. I didn't set out to hide Crosspoint innovations. But after that dinner, their laughter searing my brain, I knew I had to. Not out of shame, but defiance. I wanted success that didn't lean on their name, their pity, or their connections. I wanted a win carved from my own hands, in a country that celebrates the relentless. So I built in the dark. While Rachel strutted through courtrooms, stacking bar association plaques, I debugged code at 3 a.m., eyes bloodshot, fingers cramped from endless typing. While Nathan hopped firms chasing fancier titles, I haggled with data centers over server rates, crashing on a thrift store cot beneath my desk. While Dad raised glasses to legacy at black tie galas, I pitched angel investors from a folding chair in a Flatbush closet office, my $10 blazer fraying at the cuffs. In Silicon Valley coffee shops, I sat among tech bros pitching their apps, none suspecting the quiet woman with the duct-taped laptop would one day outrun them all. Year 2, I landed a $50,000 seed round from a grizzled investor who squinted at me over his whiskey. "You've got fire, girl. Don't let it flicker out." I hired my first engineer, a scrappy coder from Queens who saw the vision my family refused to. But it wasn't all upward climbs. My first big pitch, a Bay Area VC with a Rolex and a sneer, tanked hard. "Nice try, sweetheart, but you're no Musk," he said, waving me off. I stumbled to my Honda, hands shaking, and collapsed against the wheel, sobs ripping out of me. Not just from his rejection, from the weight of proving myself to ghosts who'd never care. I sat there, engine off, staring at the dashboard, whispering, "Why am I even trying?" But something, stubbornness, maybe, growled back, "Not yet." Then came the real blow. I trusted a partner, a smooth-talking consultant promising big contracts. He bolted with $80,000 of my early earnings. I found out in my freezing apartment, he cut, bills stacked like tombstones. I sank to the floor, head in hands, muttering, "I'm done." The dark swallowed me, hours of staring at that cracked laptop, ready to smash it. But dawn broke, and I dragged myself up, freelancing double shifts, fueled by rage and cheap noodles. Maria, the coffee shop owner where I coded daily, saw me unraveling. One night, she slid me a free coffee. "You're tougher than you look, Mija. My nephew's startup needs server help, he's paying." That $1,000 gig she tossed me kept the lights on. Family dinners were my masterclass in deception. I kept a dingy apartment they knew, drove that Honda to Christmas, played the struggling freelancer. Still at it, Rachel would ask, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. "Just small projects," I'd smile, biting back the truth. They pitted me. I let them. Behind the curtain, Crosspoint roared to life. We built AI engines that predicted network failures, rerouted systems in real time, saved Fortune 100 companies billions. While they debated case law over dry turkey, I signed international licensing deals, hired MIT grads under strict NDAs, built a machine they couldn't ignore. Year 5, we crossed $2 billion in valuation. I stood on a San Francisco rooftop, Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the fog, toasting my team with dollar store champagne, the wind whipping my hair. Year 6, we acquired our first competitor. I signed the papers in a borrowed suit, grinning as their CEO, a Stanford hotshot, shook my hand. "Didn't see you coming." Year 8, our IPO shook Wall Street. Forbes crowned me the Shadow Titan. I read it in my fake Brooklyn dive, penthouse still under wraps. I stayed silent, not to prove them wrong, but to protect my creation from their inevitable spin. That silence cost me Mom's pride, warped by lies, holidays alone. No, I'm proud of you, without suspicion. But it gave me ownership. Every stumble, every triumph mine. Now they want it in. Rachel's glossy resume, Nathan's buzzword salad. Proof they only looked when there was profit to chase. I didn't smirk. I seethed. Crosspoint wasn't revenge. It was redemption, a fist through every sneer, every small stuff jab. A legacy too massive to laugh off. They'd miss the fire. Soon, they'd feel its burn. If this empire's rise has you hooked, subscribe. The heat's about to spike. The irony was a chef's kiss. Perfectly bitter, perfectly sweet. For 10 years, they'd mocked me. Now Rachel and Nathan's names blinked in our applicant system, clawing for C-suite titles at the company they'd called a pipe dream. I could have trashed their applications with one swipe. But I didn't want easy, I wanted them to feel it. "Jordan," I said, sipping espresso with deliberate calm, "schedule the interviews. 15th floor. That windowless box we use for entry-level grunts." He grinned, tapping his tablet. "The one with the wobbly table and the flickering light?" "Exactly. No flash, no skyline. Let's see how they hold up when the room doesn't bow to them." "Who's running the gauntlet?" he asked. "Start with Dr. Emily Tran, CTO, young, brilliant, everything they sneered at. Then Leo Garcia, innovation lead, no tolerance for hot air." "No heads up on who they're meeting?" "Nope. Let them assume it's middle management gatekeepers. Keep my name off every scrap of paper." "Got it," he said, smirking like he could taste the chaos. I reread Rachel's resume. Overblown claims of digital leadership that wouldn't survive a stress test. Nathan's was worse, a buzzword bingo card masquerading as experience. Fury simmered, but I kept it locked down. This wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. Next morning, I skipped my top-floor office and prowled the 15th floor hall. The conference room was a masterpiece of humility. Drab gray chairs, a dusty whiteboard, a table that creaked under pressure. Security feeds caught them arriving. Rachel swept in, heels clicking across the marble lobby, radiating courtroom swagger. Powerful, artificial. Nathan fumbled his tie every 3 steps, glancing at his phone like it might beam him out. They had no clue they'd walked into my trap. Emily Tran, my secret weapon, entered first, a second-gen Vietnamese-American prodigy who'd turned down Google to join me. I smiled from the shadows as she sat, her calm masking a mind sharper than a blade. Rachel launched into a polished spiel about leading digital pivots. Emily cut her off mid-sentence. What back-end architecture did you implement? Cloud-based or legacy? Rachel blinked, thrown. Well, I supervised the transition. I wasn't hands-on. So, no technical input? Emily's smile was a scalpel. Nathan fared worse. Asked about AI scalability, he parroted a 5-year-old TED Talk line. Emily didn't flinch. That's cute. Next. Round 2, Leo Garcia, ex-Marine turned tech genius, sliced through their fluff. Crypto trends? Blank stares. Predictive modeling? Silence. Rachel snapped. Is this some junior role screening? Leo leaned in, voice low. We evaluate merit, not last names. By round 4, they were shells. Rachel's pen tapping a frantic SOS. Nathan's tie a noose around his neck. Later, alone in the elevator, I called Sam, my college roommate. They applied Sam. My own damn family. Her voice softened over the line. You okay? I hate this, I said, voice breaking, tears welling. I hate that I still want them to see me, not the CEO, just me. The doors dinged open. I swiped my face dry, steeling myself again. I tapped my earpiece. Jordan set up the reveal. They'd underestimated me once. Now they sat in a cage of my making, flailing under their own arrogance. If you're cheering this takedown, subscribe. Valerie's about to drop the hammer. The 15th floor hallway was silent as a held breath, the calm before a verdict drops. Through the one-way glass, I watched Rachel and Nathan slump in that bleak room. Rachel's pen stabbed her notepad like a weapon. Nathan's tie hung crooked, a defeated flag. 4 rounds had stripped their polish bare. Jordan, I said into my earpiece, open the door. The lock clicked. I stepped in. Their heads jerked up. Time froze. Rachel's face locked, half recognition, half denial. Nathan's jaw dropped, eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. Valerie. Rachel's voice cracked, brittle. What the hell are you doing here? I walked to the table's head, slow and deliberate. Power doesn't rush, it commands. I'm here, I said, dropping my tablet with a thud that echoed, because your interviews are over. And you bombed. Nathan squinted, voice shaky. How would you even know? Because I cut in, locking eyes with him. I own this company. Silence slammed into the room like a tidal wave. I'm V. Cross, I said, voice steady as steel. Founder and CEO of Crosspoint Innovations. Rachel's face drained white. That's not possible. You're a freelancer. I smirked, cold as winter. That's what I let you believe. They glanced around the bare conference room. Gray walls, no windows, like it might explain the impossible. While you were mocking my choices, I said, words sharp as glass, I was building this. While you offered me IT grunt work, I was closing multi-million-dollar licensing deals. While you laughed at me over holiday dinners, I was forging an empire you couldn't dream of. Nathan's knuckles whitened on the table's edge. Why didn't you tell us? Oh, now you're interested? I laughed, bitter and jagged. Funny how that switches when you're the ones begging. I slid their resumes across the table, the paper scraping like a guillotine. These aren't just applications, they're proof. Not of ambition, but of your hypocrisy. You never respected me until you thought I could hand you something. Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but I silenced her with a glare. Don't bother, I snapped. I've heard enough excuses. I stood, towering over them. Right now, Dad's upstairs, pitching Cross and Fields to a company he doesn't know I run. The same father who said I was wasting my life. Nathan's voice dropped, almost a plea. Val, please, don't do this. You mean don't treat you the way you treated me? I said, pausing to let it sink in. Don't hold you accountable for years of dismissal, judgment, and condescension? I turned toward the door, heels clicking on the tile. No callbacks. No second chances. You're not qualified, and you're not welcome. Rachel's voice broke as I reached the exit. You can't just walk away like this. I spun back, eyes blazing. Watch me. The door shut behind me, the sound of gavel on hardwood. 10 years of being their punching bag, erased in a single, searing moment. But this wasn't the end. Dad was next, and he had no idea what waited. Subscribe now. This showdown's climbing to the top floor. The executive conference room on Crosspoint Tower's top floor was designed for moments like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan's skyline in a blaze of afternoon light. The obsidian table gleamed like a dark mirror. Junior partners from Cross and Field shuffled legal briefs, their nervous energy buzzing. Dad stood at the glass, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared in that familiar pose of unshakable control, still oblivious. Miss Cross is ready, Jordan announced, swinging the door wide. Thomas Cross turned and froze. Valerie. His voice wavered, a crack in his granite facade. Why are you? I strode to the head of the table and sat, my presence slicing through the room. Hello, Dad. You're here to pitch legal services to Crosspoint Innovations, right? His face shifted, confusion, then disbelief, then a flicker of dread. One of his associates, a young suit with a stack of folders, paled, realizing this wasn't a client meeting, it was a reckoning. I don't understand, Dad said, still standing, clinging to authority. We have a meeting with V. Cross. You do, I replied, calm as a still sea. You're looking at her. Silence choked the room, thick and heavy. You, he whispered, voice barely audible. Yes, I said, clear and cutting. Founder. CEO. The tech company you said would never last. The startup you dismissed over mashed potatoes and gravy. He sank into a chair, the weight of it all pulling him down. How? He asked, breath shallow. I let the question hang, my gaze never leaving his. 10 years ago, I began, voice steady but edged, at that dinner. You told me real success wears a tie and argues in courtrooms. Rachel laughed like it was a comedy show. Nathan offered me a pity job building websites. I laid out my vision, and you all buried it under your smug little toasts. He flinched, a rare crack in his armor. You made it crystal clear I'd never measure up, I continued. So, I stopped trying to fit your mold. I built my own America, one where grit and code outweigh pedigrees and gavels. I thought you were consulting, he murmured, eyes on the table. That's what I wanted you to think, I said. It was easier than trusting you with the truth, and safer than watching you twist it. He glanced at the proposal packet, Cross and Fields bid to partner with a company he didn't know his daughter ruled. Rachel and Nathan, he said slowly. They applied here? They did. They interviewed. They failed. I stood, pacing to the windows, the city sprawling below. I built all this while you called me a disappointment. No support. No guidance. No respect. And now you're here, asking for my business. He shot up, voice rising with a desperate edge. Valerie, we're family. Let me make this right. I'll give you a stake in Cross and Fields. A piece of the legacy. I turned, ice in my veins. I don't need your crumbs. His face, usually stone, fractured. Then Jordan stepped forward, handing me a file. Found this in the archives, Miss Cross. Thought you'd want it now. I opened it, financial records from year 2. A $200,000 investment from an anonymous fund, funneled through a Delaware shell company. I'd assumed it was a silent angel. The trail ended with a name, Thomas Cross. My head snapped up. You, he blinked, lost. What? I held up the file, voice low and lethal. Year 2. You invested in Crosspoint. Didn't know it was mine, did you? The room gasped. His face drained of color. He stammered. I put money in a tech fund. High risk, high reward. I didn't check the details. I laughed, a raw, jagged sound that echoed off the glass. You funded me. The daughter you wrote off as a failure bankrolled your smart bet. And now you're here, begging at the table you helped set. He sank back, hands trembling. I didn't know. Of course not, I said, voice cutting deeper. You never looked. The irony was poetic. His own money, his own blindness, had built the empire he now groveled before. You didn't just doubt me, I said, stepping closer. You erased me. Chose ego over love. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. No, I said, final. As CEO, I'm making the call. I picked up his firm's proposal and handed it to Jordan. Inform Cross and Fields their services won't be required. Effective immediately. He stood, shell-shocked, a man reduced. What happens now? That's on you, I said, turning away. I'm done shrinking so you can feel tall. The door closed with a thud. Game over. If this twist blew your mind, subscribe. The finale's about to hit. By the time I reached my penthouse that night, the messages had flooded in. Rachel, 12 missed calls, each more frantic. Nathan, 3 texts, spiraling from shock to panic. Mom's voicemail started with tears and faded to silence. Dad's text cut deepest. You built something extraordinary, against me, with my own blind money. I see it now. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed space, not to hide, but to breathe through the storm inside me. For 10 years, I'd carried their dismissal like a weight strapped to my back. Silence had been my shield, success my rebellion. Now the mask was off, and Dad's accidental investment twisted the knife, a bitter gift I hadn't asked for. The next evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I invited them all, Rachel, Nathan, Mom, Dad, to dinner. Not at the fake Brooklyn dive they knew, but here, my real home. Marble foyer, floor-to-ceiling views of Central Park, the life I'd hidden. They arrived hesitantly, eyes wide, as they stepped into the penthouse. Rachel's heels clicked uncertainly. Nathan's tie was still askew. Mom clutched her purse, like a lifeline. Dad trailed last, shoulders slumped. The air was thick with unspoken shame. This isn't forgiveness, I said as they sat, my voice firm but not cruel. It's not wiping the slate clean. It's a chance to move forward, honestly. If you're willing. They nodded, slow, ashamed, but real. I took the head of the long dining table, a spot I'd imagined claiming through every year of their scorn. No more secrets, I said. Here's the truth. I laid it bare. The ramen nights in a heatless Brooklyn hole, shivering as I coded. The first pitch that flopped in Palo Alto, I sobbed in my car after, fists pounding the wheel, screaming at a world that wouldn't listen. The $80,000 I lost to a conman partner, nearly breaking me. I sat in the dark, ready to quit, until Maria's $1,000 gig pulled me back. The prototype that crashed, then the one that sang. Tears alone after my first big contract. Investors who laughed in my face. The Queen's coder who stayed. Dad's $200,000 I didn't know I'd used. The IPO that changed everything. Year 4, a logistics CEO sent a note. Your systems saved us. You're the future. I framed it on my wall, a lifeline when I felt invisible. Their faces shifted with every word, shock, guilt, awe, and finally, respect. Rachel whispered, voice small, you didn't owe us this. You're right, I said, but I owed it to myself. Dad cleared his throat, rough. I tried forcing you into my version of success. I was wrong. You didn't follow our legacy. You built a better one. And I helped blind as a bat. I met his gaze, unflinching. And I won't dim it for anyone. He nodded. You shouldn't. Then he leaned forward, tentative. I could advise you, help steer this ship. I paused, then shook my head.
No.
But there's a kid in Brooklyn with a startup, hungry, raw. Needs your grit. I'll make the intro. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. A new path, not mine. There's more, I said. I'm sharing Crosspoint, equity for my team, the ones who bled with me. That's my legacy. They stared, stunned, a mix of pride and loss in their eyes. As they left, one by one, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, free of needing their nods, free of their shadows. Next morning, I walked into Crosspoint, no more muted suits, no more hiding. The press went wild. The Cross revealed, tech billionaire built empire with father's blind cash. I didn't care about the noise. An email pinged, a Bronx intern. Ms. Cross, your YI code. Thank you. I stepped onto my balcony, skyline blazing, and carried my old laptop, the duct-taped relic that started it all. In my office, I set it on a glass stand, a small plaque beneath, where it started. They'd carry their mistake forever. I'd carry my fire and pass it on. If Valerie's journey sparked something in you, subscribe. More stories of grit are coming.